Every year, millions of people walk past statues carved thousands of years ago and barely give them a second glance. But some of these sculptures have quietly baffled historians, engineers, and scientists for centuries. Not because they're beautiful, though many of them are, but because the more you learn about them, the less sense they make. How were they carved? How were they moved? Why were they made at all? Some of these questions have partial answers. Others have almost none. Today, we're looking at ancient statues that still leave experts scratching their heads. Let's start with the most famous ones. Number 1, the Moai of Easter Island. Easter Island is one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. It sits in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, more than 2,000 miles from the coast of Chile and over 1,000 miles from the nearest inhabited island. And scattered across this tiny volcanic island are nearly 900 giant stone figures. Except they're not just heads, which is how most people picture them. Many of them have full torsos buried beneath the soil, something that surprised a lot of people when excavations revealed the bodies hidden underground. These statues, called Moai, were carved by the Rapa Nui people sometime between roughly 1250 and 1500 AD. The average Moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs around 14 tons, but the largest ones are far bigger. One unfinished statue, nicknamed El Gigante, still lies in the quarry where it was being cut and would have stood around 70 feet tall if it had ever been completed and raised. And that's where the mystery begins. How did a population with no wheels, no cranes, and no large draft animals move statues weighing dozens of tons across miles of rugged terrain? For a long time, this seemed impossible. The islanders themselves had an answer, though. Their oral tradition said the statues walked to their positions. For years, researchers treated this as a legend, nothing more. But in 2012, a team led by archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo tested the idea directly. They built a full-size replica of a Moai and, using just a small group of people and 3 ropes, they rocked it from side to side, walking it forward step by step in an upright position. It actually worked. The statue moved forward much like you'd move a heavy refrigerator across a kitchen floor. It doesn't prove that's exactly how every Moai was moved, but it showed the walking tradition wasn't just a fairy tale. Even so, the sheer scale of the project, hundreds of statues over generations on an isolated island, remains staggering. And the deeper question of why the Rapa Nui poured so much of their society's energy into these figures is still debated. Number 2, the Great Sphinx of Giza. Everybody knows the Sphinx. It's the enormous limestone statue with the body of a lion and the head of a human, sitting on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, right next to the famous pyramids. It's about 240 feet long and 66 feet high, carved directly out of the bedrock. It is one of the largest and oldest monumental sculptures in the world. And despite being one of the most recognizable objects on the planet, we still can't say for certain who built it, exactly when, or even who it's supposed to represent. The mainstream view among Egyptologists is that the Sphinx was built during the reign of the pharaoh Khafra, around 2500 BC, and that its face may represent Khafra himself. But here's the strange part. There is no contemporary inscription that plainly says, Khafra built this. The connection is based on indirect evidence, its location near Khafra's pyramid and causeway, the style, and so on. That absence of a clear label on such a massive monument is genuinely unusual. On top of that, some researchers have pointed to weathering patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure, arguing the erosion looks like it was caused by heavy rainfall rather than wind and sand. If that were true, it might push the monument's origins back to a much wetter, earlier period. Most geologists and Egyptologists disagree with that interpretation, and the debate remains contested rather than settled. But the fact that experts still argue over the age of one of the most famous statues on Earth tells you how many open questions surround it. Number 3. The Olmec colossal heads. Long before the Aztecs and the Maya became famous, the Olmec civilization flourished along the Gulf Coast of Mexico from around 1200 to 400 BC. They're often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and they left behind something extraordinary: 17 colossal stone heads that have been discovered so far. These heads are massive. The largest stands around 11 feet tall and is estimated to weigh in the range of 40 tons. Each one is carved from a single block of basalt, and each has distinct facial features, so much so that many researchers believe they're portraits of specific rulers rather than generic figures. Here's the problem. The basalt used to make these heads came from the Tuxtla Mountains, and in some cases the stone was moved as far as 60 miles or more to reach the sites where the heads were carved and displayed. We're talking about multi-ton blocks of volcanic rock being transported across rivers, swamps, and dense terrain by a civilization with no wheeled vehicles for heavy loads and no draft animals. How exactly they did this isn't fully understood. Some researchers suggest a combination of rafts along waterways, sledges, and enormous amounts of human labor. But there's no surviving record explaining the method. And the carving itself is remarkable. Detailed helmets, individualized faces, all shaped from some of the hardest volcanic stone using stone tools, since the Olmec did not have metal tools for this kind of work. Number 4. The Moai eyes and the mystery of purpose. Let's go back to Easter Island for a moment, because there's a detail people often miss. For a long time, the Moai were thought to have always had blank, empty eye sockets. But in 1978, archaeologists made a discovery. Fragments of white coral and red stone were found and reconstructed into an eye that fit perfectly into a Moai socket. It turned out that at least some of the statues originally had inlaid eyes made of white coral with pupils of dark stone. With the eyes in place, the statues would have looked strikingly alive, gazing inland over the communities they were built to watch. This changes how we picture them. These weren't meant to be the weathered gray faces we see in photographs today. They were meant to have a presence, a gaze, and it deepens the question of their purpose. The leading view is that the Moai represented deified ancestors, watching over and protecting the living. But so much of the specific religious meaning was lost as the island's traditional society was disrupted, and we're left reconstructing it from fragments. Number 5. The Yonaguni Monument. Off the coast of Yonaguni, one of Japan's southern islands, divers in 1986 discovered something strange underwater. A massive rock formation with flat terraces, straight edges, and what looked like steps and platforms. It sits below the surface, and it's genuinely enormous. And this one comes with a real unresolved scientific debate. Some researchers, most notably the geologist Masaki Kimura, have argued that the Yonaguni Monument is at least partly man-made or man-modified, pointing to the sharp angles and regular features. If they're right, and if the structure was carved when that area was above water, it would have to be thousands of years old, since sea levels rose after the last ice age. Other geologists argue the opposite, that the whole thing is a natural formation. The type of sandstone there tends to fracture along straight lines and flat plains, which can produce surprisingly geometric-looking shapes without any human involvement. So this isn't a case of scientists hiding something. It's a genuine, ongoing disagreement about whether we're looking at architecture or geology. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes it fascinating. Now, for the supporting cast. These are a bit shorter, but no less intriguing. The guardian lions and monolithic carving traditions aside, consider the unfinished obelisk of Aswan. It's not a statue in the strictest sense, but it belongs in this conversation. In a quarry in Aswan, Egypt, there's an enormous obelisk that was being carved directly out of the bedrock and abandoned when cracks appeared. Had it been finished, it would have stood around 137 feet tall and weighed over 1,000 tons, larger than any obelisk ever successfully raised. It's still lying there, half carved into the ground. It gives us a rare window into ancient stoneworking, and it also raises the obvious question: how did they ever intend to move and lift something that heavy? The Raies bronzes, discovered in 1972 off the coast of Raiace in southern Italy, these are two life-size Greek bronze statues of warriors, dating to around 450 BC. What makes them remarkable is that very few large Greek bronzes survived at all. Most were melted down over the centuries for their metal. These two escaped that fate by sinking. They show an astonishing level of anatomical skill, and even today experts debate who made them and exactly whom they represent. The statues of Monte Prama. On the island of Sardinia, a farmer plowing a field in 1974 struck stone, and what emerged over years of excavation were fragments of large stone statues, warriors, archers, and boxes made by the ancient Nuragic civilization. They date to roughly the early 1st millennium BC. The statues had been broken into pieces in antiquity, and archaeologists have spent decades reassembling them. Who exactly made them and why they were smashed and buried is still not fully understood. And finally, the Buddhas of Bamiyan. In the Bamiyan Valley of Afghanistan, two colossal statues of the Buddha were carved directly into a sandstone cliff, the largest standing around 180 feet tall. They were created around the 6th century AD and stood for roughly 1,400 years. Tragically, they were deliberately destroyed in 2001. But even before that loss, questions lingered about the full extent of the cave complex around them, the pigments once used to paint them, and the community of monks who carved an entire sacred landscape into the rock. So there you have it. Ancient statues that our ancestors created, sometimes thousands of years ago, that we either can't fully explain, can't easily replicate, or are still arguing about today. The Moai walked across an island, or seemed to have. The Sphinx guards a secret about its own age. The Olmecs somehow hauled 40-ton heads across 60 miles of wilderness. And beneath the sea off Japan, we're still not sure if we're looking at the work of human hands or the work of the ocean. It makes you wonder how much meaning has quietly slipped away over the centuries. These statues were built by people who cared deeply about something, deeply enough to move mountains of stone by hand. And in many cases, the exact reason went with them. The figures remain, the faces remain, but the voices that could explain them fell silent a long time ago. So maybe the next time you stand in front of an old statue, it's worth remembering that you might be looking at an answer to a question we've already forgotten how to ask.